This is a bowline knot. In the first 90 seconds of this video, I'm going to show you how to tie this knot with a close-up on my hands, step by step. There's also a bunch of different ways of tying a bowline knot, and in this video we're going to show you 18 different ways. The first 4 are just different methods of tying a classic or regular bowline knot, and then the remaining 14 are variations that are slightly structurally different than the classic bowline knot. So we're going to cover all of those in this video. I think that we've captured every known bowline in this video, but if you know of one that I haven't mentioned, leave a comment and I'd be happy to hear about it. Let's dive in with how to tie a bowline knot. Alright, I'm going to show you how to tie a regular bowline using the classic method of tying the bowline. And you may have heard of the rabbit analogy, and this is the most straightforward way of learning the bowline. And what you're going to do is you're going to first put a loop into the middle of your rope such that the side that is coming to the end of my rope that I'm working with here, which is called the working end, is on top. Okay? And so the rabbit analogy goes like this. This is the rabbit's hole. The end of my rope is the rabbit. He's going to come out of the hole, go around the tree, and then back into the rabbit hole. That's the classic method of tying the bowline, and I'll show you that one more time just to make sure it's clear. Alright, the second method of tying a regular bowline I'm going to show you is the method that I use most often, and the reason I use this is because it's actually much faster, I think, and a bit more straightforward than the bunny and the hole method. So let me show you how this works. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the working end, this short end of my rope here, and I'm going to grip it between my 2 fingers like so. Alright, then I'm going to place it across my other rope. Alright, and I'll be holding, you might not be able to say this perfectly, but I'll be holding the standing end of this rope with my left hand. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip upwards so that my working end of my rope is pointing up through the hole, and then I'm going to pass this rope off to my left hand and bring it around and give it back to my first 2 fingers and then pull through, and that gives me a bowline. Alright, and now I'm going to show you what this looks like when you go through it full speed. Alright, that's what it looks like. And one more time, a little bit slower this time, so you can see. Flip, around, grab. Alright, now I'm going to show you the method of tying the bowline that you can do with one hand. So I just have my right hand here, which is my strong hand, and I have my left hand behind my back right now. And so what you do is you grab the rope between your thumb and your pointer finger, and then you put it right across on top of your other rope. You kind of grip it with your pinky, and then you flip up. Okay? So I haven't gone all the way over my wrist, because if I did that, I'd get stuck later. I've gone just kind of past my second knuckle. And then I'm going to pass with my fingers the rope around the standing end of the rope, and then I'm going to pull. I pulled it out of the frame there, but you can see that that's a bowline. Alright, let's run that back one more time. One-handed bowline. Alright, the last method I'm going to show you for tying a regular bowline knot is for when you need to tie the end of the rope to create a loop around something in front of you. So every method I've shown you so far, the loop has actually been behind me out of the frame. But this time, I'm going to take the rope and I'm going to loop it around something that's in front of me, and I'm going to tie the bowline here. So effectively, I'm tying the same knot, but I'm doing it in reverse. Alright, and so what you're going to do for that is you're going to create a loop like this with the end that's coming towards you on top, and then you still have the bunny acronym in mind. The bunny isn't going to go out of its hole, it's going to go in its hole, it's going to go through a tunnel and then it's going to come out of the hole again. And so that's how you tie a bowline when the loop that you're forming is out in front of you. Let me show that one more time. Okay, now this is the double bowline. You start the same way you did before when you were using the rabbit method, but now we just form a second loop. From this point, the rest of the steps are the same. Let's see that one more time. Now this variation is called the water bowline, and it's tied by first forming a clove hitch in the line. So I'm going to create a loop where the working end, which comes to the end of my rope, is on top of the loop. Then I'm going to pull my rope down a little bit, form another loop, and then that loop I'm going to place on top of my first loop. Then I'm going to take the working end, the end of my rope, push it up through the hole, around this rope, and then back through and down in my original hole. And then you got to tighten it on all lines. Let's run that again. Your first loop, second loop, Alright, this variation is called the Yosemite Bowline, also known as the bowline with a Yosemite finish. And you tie this knot basically how you would tie a regular classic bowline, but you need to make sure that you have some extra slack when you go about tying this, and I'll show you why. So tie your classic rabbit going in and out of the hole method knot, and then make sure you've got extra slack on your working end. Now, instead of tightening the bowline at this point, I'm going to add the Yosemite finish, which I loop the rope behind, and then I go around and then up through. It's essentially forming a double knot here on this bottom loop. And then I pull tight, and that's my Yosemite Bowline. Let me run that back one more time. This variation is called the Cowboy Bowline. It's also known as the Dutch Bowline, the Winter Bowline, or the left-handed bowline, and you'll see why some people call it the left-handed bowline in just a second here. You start it off just like you would start your normal classic bowline, and you take your working end and you go out around, but this time, instead of going around the standing end of the rope this way, like you would for a normal bowline, we're going to do the opposite. And we're going to come around this way, and then back down. Okay, let's see that one more time. So you start with your normal loop, you go up through, and then around this way. Now this is called the running bowline. It's just like a regular bowline knot, except for this time we're going to make it adjustable essentially by tying the loop around the standing end of our rope. So I have my working end and my standing end here. The first thing I'm going to do is just put a twist like so that I have a loop around the standing end of my rope like so. From that point on, it becomes very simple. We just tie our normal bowline knot, and I'm going to use my favorite method for that. There you have it. This is a standing bowline. I'll show you that one more time. Get the twist. I have my loop. Now I can tie a regular bowline. My loop is around the standing end, so now my knot is adjustable. This time I'm going to show you a variation that's actually 3 different variations of a very similar knot. So the first one I'm going to show you is called the Eskimo Bowline, and then very closely related to the Eskimo Bowline is the Cossack Knot and the Kalmyk loop. Okay, I'll show you each one in order. So first, the Eskimo Bowline. I have the working end of my rope here, and I have the standing end of my rope here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a loop such that the working end of my rope is passing underneath my loop. Then I'm going to stick the working end of my rope up through the hole that I've created, and then I'm going to take my working end, pass it through this loop on the bottom, and then I'm going to lift it and then pass it back down through my original loop. And you can see here that the bowline shape is taking form. If I tighten this up, I can also see on the other side that it forms this 3-part knot on the back. So that's the Eskimo Bowline. And then the Cossack Knot is very similar, but you'll notice here on my Eskimo Bowline that the working end of the rope is on the inside of the loop that I've created. Basically the only difference between this and the Cossack Knot is that the working end of the rope goes on the outside of the loop when it's all finished. So let me show you that. The same beginning here. Get my loop. Then I'm going to come back up. Straighten out my rope here. Come up the loop. Alright, and now is where the knot gets a little bit different. So now I'm going to take the working end of my rope, and I'm going to put it inside my larger loop, and I'm going to pass it underneath my rope here. Then I'm going to take my working end and pass it back through my original loop. And you can see again there the bowline shape taking form. So that's the Cossack Knot. And then the final variation that I want to show you is simply the Cossack Knot slipped. So, and that's called the Kalmyk knot. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that correctly. It begins with a K, but I think it might be pronounced the Kalmyk knot. And so I'm just going to show you what it looks like if I've slipped that. So I'm going to give myself a little bit more slack here so that I can form a bight. And then I'm going to do the same thing that I did before, but this time it'll be slipped. Pulling this tight is a little bit tricky, but once I pull it tight, I have the Kalmyk knot. And you can see you still have the three pieces of the knot on the back, and I have added a slip. So that essentially means when I'm ready to untie this, I can pull out my slip knot and it breaks free. So that is the Eskimo Bowline, the Cossack Knot, and the Kalmyk loop. Now this variation is called the Portuguese Bowline. This is a really interesting variant because it actually ends up giving you 2 separate loops instead of the normal 1 loop that you get from a bowline. So I'll show you how to tie that now. The first thing you're going to do is just like your normal bowline knot, you're going to create the loop, and then you're going to take the end and stick it up through the hole just like you would with a normal bowline. And now this is where it gets different. Instead of going around your standing end of the rope, you're actually going to create an additional loop and then come back up through the bottom a second time. And then from this point, you complete your normal bowline. So you take the working end, you pass it behind the standing end of the rope here, and then back through your original loop and pull it tight. Now once you've done this, you can see the bowline shape there, and you can see that you get 2 different loops. And so if you have your 2 different loops a little bit different size like I have for mine, you can actually adjust it just by pulling slack from one side to the other. It's an adjustable knot for the loop sizes. So that is the Portuguese Bowline. I will also note that I've heard Portuguese Bowline and French Bowline used interchangeably. I think some people would argue that it is the same knot. I've heard some folks say though that it's actually different, that there is a slight difference between the two, but I'm actually not really sure what the difference between the two are, and I've tried to figure it out and it's not clear to me what the difference is. So if you do know what the difference is between a Portuguese Bowline and a French Bowline, please let me know in the comments. I'd be really curious to hear that. Alright, now we're going to tie the Spanish Bowline, which is arguably the most complicated variant of the Bowline knot. So what you're going to do is you're going to grab your rope just like you're getting it in the middle here. And what this knot allows you to do is to tie a couple loops on the middle of a rope. So what you do is grab the middle of the rope, and then you are going to form 2 loops by flipping with both of your hands away from you, such that the ends of the rope that are coming off are on top. And then you're going to repeat that same motion a second time. Alright, so now you have 2 loops here, and you have a twist in the rope. And I'm actually going to pull out some extra slack to make my loops a little bit bigger here. Alright, so now I have this, I have 2 loops, and what I'm going to do next is I'm going to take my left loop, and I'm going to pass it under and through my right loop, like so. And so if you've done this correctly, what you should get is 2 large loops and then a small loop coming around the ends of your knot, the ends of your rope at the bottom. Alright, now for the next step, what we're going to do is we're actually going to put both of our hands up through these loops, almost like we're putting ourselves in rope handcuffs here. And then with each hand, we're going to grab our small central loop on the side that is closest to that hand. So with my right hand, I'm going to grab one part of the loop that's closest to me, and with my left hand, same thing on the left side. Now this is a little bit tricky, but I'm going to now pull those ropes through, and what this is going to do is it's going to create 2 loops in the body of my Spanish Bowline. Takes a little bit of doing to tighten the knot up, but once we have it, what we should get is something like this, where we have 2 loops coming off the top, we have this triangle style shape in the middle, and then we have 2 parallel pieces of rope coming off. So this is a fairly complicated knot, so let me show you how to do this one more time. We'll take the knot apart here. Alright, so we're back at the beginning. We're going to flip up and away from ourselves, flip a second time. Okay, I'm going to make my loops a little bit bigger here. I'm going to take my left loop, pass it through the right loop, and here we are. Alright, now it's time for handcuffs. Grab, and then on this side, grab, and then pull. Alright. And that is the second time through on our Spanish Bowline. Let's dress it up a little bit. There we have it. Alright, this time I'm going to show you how to tie the Birmingham Bowline. The Birmingham Bowline starts off just like your regular bowline. So you get your loop, you go up through from the bottom, back around the standing end, and then down through your original loop. But one difference is this time we need to make sure that we give ourselves some extra slack, because we're going to need that for the rest of the Birmingham Bowline. All right, just a tiny bit more. All right, I have enough slack here now, and now with the working end of my rope, I'm going to repeat some of the steps of the bowline a second time. So I'm not going to do anything with the original loop. I've already tied my original loop, but I am going to come back out of that loop again. I'm going to go around the standing end of my rope again, and then I'm going to go back down through the bottom a second time. So then once you tighten it up, that'll give you the Birmingham Bowline. And there's two main differences between this form of the bowline and a normal bowline. And one you'll notice right away, there's 2 loops on the top instead of just one piece of rope there. And then the second difference is that you get 2 loops instead of the normal one that you would get with a regular bowline. So that's the Birmingham Bowline. This time I'm going to show you how to tie the triple bowline, which is basically like a regular bowline except where it has 3 loops at the end. And the way that you make that happen is that you begin by doubling up your rope by forming a bight. Just putting them together and getting this piece like this. This is called forming a bight. And so from this point on, I'm just going to give myself some slack, but from this point on, you're basically going to tie the bowline just like you would normally, except for you're using 2 parallel ropes instead of 1. So I'll put my loop in just like I normally would, and then I'm going to take the end of my rope, which is the bight there, and then I'm going to take it, pass it around, give myself a little extra slack, and then pass it back through my original loop. The first 2 loops in the triple bowline are formed by your bight, your 2 parallel pieces of rope, but then the third loop is formed by the piece of rope that you feed through at the end. So you can see there's a bowline shape. Let me dress this up a little bit. There's the bowline shape there, and then I have at the bottom 3 different loops. Now you could make these loops quite a bit bigger, and if you were using this in the real world, you probably would make them bigger. I just made them small for the purposes of illustration in this video. So that's the triple bowline. Alright, this variation now is called the bowline on the bight. This is a pretty interesting variant, and what you need to do first to tie this is to form a bight, which is basically getting a pinched loop in the end of your rope like so. Now from here on out, you have a couple steps that are just like your normal bowline, and then one step that's a little bit tricky. So I'll show you how to do that. So the first thing you're going to do is give yourself a little bit of slack, and then make a loop in your rope just like you would for tying a normal bowline. Alright, and now you're going to take the bight end of your rope, and you're going to pass it up through just like you would again for a normal bowline. But once you get up through the bottom of the loop, this is where things change. So now you have this loop at the end. What you're going to do is bring it towards yourself and then pass the rest of the knot through that loop. And then once you've done that, you can pull the bottom of your knot, and you can see the bowline shape taking form. So that's the bowline on the bight. The end result is that you have 2 loops and your bowline in the middle, just like so. This one's fairly tricky, so let me show you that one more time. Alright, so we have our bight again. We're going to make our loop, go up through, come towards yourself, take the loop and pass the rest of the knot through, and then you can pull this part of the knot down, and that gives you the bowline shape. Now with this knot, I've made the 2 loops on the end quite small, but in the real world you could make these quite a bit longer if you wanted to. Alright, now I'm going to show you the Slipknot method of tying the bowline, what some people might call the Slipknot Bowline. And I think this is a really cool approach to tying a normal bowline. And you start by just tying a slip knot, which you do by first creating a loop, and then creating a second loop, or a bight if you will. And then you stick your second loop up through your first loop, and then you pull it tight, like so. You don't want it to go too tight because we want it to be a little bit loose for the next step, but for a normal slip knot you would kind of pull this a bit tight. Alright, so I've got my slip knot, and the beauty of a slip knot, right, is that you can just pull it out and then the knot is gone, right? So you make a slip knot, and then you take the working end of your rope and you just stick it up through the bottom of your slip knot, and then you kind of hold it tight like this. And then all you have to do is pull this end and it transforms into a bowline, which I think is pretty cool. Let me show you that again. So first, just tie a normal slip knot, like so. Then take your working end, go through the loop that you formed for your slip knot, and then pull. And that'll give you a bowline.